I'm sorry, I'm not obsessed with dogs' bum holes or virtual dogs' bum holes, but
I might cut that bit out just before we start. The music comes on. Welcome, everybody, to Bad Voltage Season 2, Episode 21. Today's a particularly special episode. Unfortunately, we haven't got our tiny little friend Jeremy Garcia with us. He's currently swanning off in Europe somewhere. He was in Paris. I hung out with him last week in Prague and is out somewhere. I don't know where he's gone. Probably escaping the law. So we have sat in his hot seat the wonderful Mr. Alan Popey Pope.
hello. How are you doing, guys?
Good to have you. We're doing well. So Alan is a member of the Ubuntu Podcast. So be sure to check that out. Where do they find that, Popey?
UbuntuPodcast.org.
Well, isn't that a surprise?
It is. You know they're good because they come out on the same day as us, but twice as often.
That's true. And they have a more elaborate recording setup than we do. So what are we going to talk about, Mr. Langridge?
On this show, what we have is the world's biggest news segment, honestly.
It's a new record.
This is a trend recently. I don't know whether more stuff's happening or what, but we're covering a mountain of stuff. Google Drive and GitHub and stupid robot dogs and Perl and the iPhone 10 and everything. You wouldn't believe it.
Yeah. And then we're also going to get into, as we've got Popey on the show, we're going to talk about the new Ubuntu release, which came out quite recently. The desktop's got GNOME Shell and Wayland on there. There's been a bunch of new stuff. We're going to talk about Snappy. Yeah, so we've got a bumper Ubuntu segment as well.
Hell yeah.
Yes. Now, Popey, because we don't have Jeremy, could you say, and now Bad Voltage? Because that's how we do it.
And now, Bad Voltage.
Oh, yeah.
News.
It is time to be a nuisance.
You've been working on that since the last show, haven't you? Seriously.
I spent the last 5 or 10 minutes trying to think of another news-related joke. We're getting a bit thin on them now. So as thin as my hair, some would say.
We are not, however, thin on news.
No, we're not. And I think our guest of honour should probably start us off, What do you think, Popey? Give us some news.
Shall I give you some good news?
Yes.
Some good news.
Yes. Great news.
Great news for robot lovers. Sony Japan have announced the next generation of Aibos. Aibo? Robot dog, personal canine robot things. It is the little dog that you get if you're lonely and you don't have any friends. You can have a little robot that follows you around the house and catches a ball for you. And they've announced a new one.
They're going to see us spiking orders, aren't they?
Yes. What, from us lonely nerds?
from people listening to this show. That was a joke, everyone. Okay.
Yeah, so this thing runs for 2 hours. Then it needs charging, which takes 3 hours, which seems a bit rubbish.
That's efficiency right there, up at the sharp end.
I don't know if this does the thing. I never had an old one, and I don't think I know anyone stupid enough to have bought one.
Shut up. Okay.
Let's go live to our I Bought an Aibo correspondent, Jono Bacon. Now,
hey, look.
The first generation of the Aibo came out, this was years and years ago, 10 years ago maybe. And one moronic person I know bought one.
How much was it, Jono?
That's not true, okay? First of all, I had a second generation Aibo. I wasn't stupid enough to buy the first. Actually, I didn't have enough money for the first one. I bought mine on eBay. Secondhand, mint condition, because no one uses these things. And I spent £650 on it.
Wow. Well, this one, the new one, is 198,000 yen, which is 1,300 British pounds, $1,700 US. Plus,
that sounds about right.
You have to have
the subscription,
a subscription service, the plan, which is like £20, $25 per month, or you can pay it up front. Plus, you can optionally also pay for a care plan, I guess, in case the dog falls in the bath or something and dies, or some local yobs kick it down the road or something. I don't know. But, yeah.
So, first of all, Popey, I never ever want to hear you say the words personal canine ever again. That was in itself creepy. Secondly, I think this is quite cool. I mean,
You thought the first one was cool, and you thought it was cool for a week, and then it went in a drawer after playing 600 notes on it.
Well,
this is the super expensive version of a Raspberry Pi. It's something that looks cool. You buy it, and then you put it in a drawer, and nobody touches it ever again.
The thing that I think is quite cool about this. So, first of all, being serious, I think there are some people in the world who lack human companionship and who would benefit from this. I'm thinking not just, kind of weird, nerdy people, but, people who may have very serious social anxiety disorders, or people who are living in hospices or whatever it might be. And I think this is a thing that will be, I think, add some value to the world.
Now, hang on. Now, I have not had a chance to see the new one.
Oh,
right?
Dude, you just go to aibo.sony.jp, and there are cute little videos of people touching a little robot and the robot being all cutesy, and then one of the videos, it kind of looks over its shoulder at you all doughy-eyed, which is a bit weird.
Oh, really? And because if it actually acts as a sort of companion, then I can see that. The first one, the one Jono had, wasn't a dog but basically robotic. It was basically a big track but in the shape of a dog. It wasn't any kind of companion.
Was it autonomous, or did you have to say go forward 3 spaces, turn right 90 degrees?
No, it was. And it was actually, I think, to be honest with you, for the time, I think it was actually quite impressive. I mean, bear in mind that this was when I got mine.
So was the wheel the day they invented it.
It was like 1999 or something like that when I got mine. So this thing was running like a 386 SX, 50, something with a maths coprocessor.
You don't want to know where the turbo button was.
Didn't it have a memory stick slot in the bum hole of the dog?
It did have a memory stick slot. I forget where you put it, but I'm not sure if it was
blocked
the
that out. It was too traumatic, was it?
But it was quite clever for the time, and the generation after. No, actually, I think it was the one I got. No, I can't remember whether it was the one I got or the one afterwards. It would recharge itself. So basically, when it was running out of battery, it would walk over to the little charging thing. It would sit down on it, and then it would charge it. So because having to,
plug
charge
your
it
dog
regularly,
in.
kind of.
Right, yeah.
You plug your dog in did ruin the mystique of the
This is like buying
product.
a Roomba for companionship, for God's sake.
It's not like buying a Roomba for.
It's a less useful Roomba because it doesn't even clean up its virtual dog poo that it leaves all over the place.
And you've got to pay £20 a month for the privilege of owning this thing that you've already dropped $1,500 on.
I'm not sure whether a Roomba for companionship or a less useful Roomba are better show titles for this episode.
Right, so
anyway, but yeah, I think it's quite cool. I think now is a good time for this because AI, machine learning, which we keep hearing about from Google, is percolating the world. I think I applaud this. I'm not buying one because I've got a family now. Don't need one.
They certainly are definitely wedded to this concept. They've been doing the Aibo, like you say now, for years and years and years and years, and they keep bringing this thing out.
Well,
they haven't.
No, they haven't done it for a long time.
They basically shut it down.
They've come back to think they did the first generation one, they did the second generation one, they've done this. I think they did one in between. I think there was one after yours, but before this.
There was one after mine, and I think that was about it. They haven't brought one out for 15, 20 years.
Oh,
now.
Really? I assumed they'd carry on and hadn't actually seen, I admit. But yeah, I mean, at least you've got to applaud the idea. They seem to like the idea of this, as you say, the AI machine learning stuff, but in the form of an interactable thing. It's a very good Ted Chiang short story about this sort of thing.
Is interactable a word?
I don't think it is.
This one is probably different from yours in one significant way, in that it has Wi-Fi and LTE access. You can put a SIM card in. I don't know whether it goes in its bum hole, but that would be fun. I'm sorry, I'm not obsessed with dogs' bum holes or virtual dogs' bum holes, but
I might cut that bit out just before we start. The music comes on.
Right.
I'm not obsessed with dogs' bum holes.
Before we go any further down this particular dark alleyway, next piece of news.
Poor choice of words.
I try. Next piece of news, Mr. Bacon.
All right. So it turns out that developers don't really like Perl. So I'm going to read from a news story that I saw earlier today. Developers really dislike Perl and projects associated with Microsoft, at least among those who volunteered their views through Stack Overflow. Now, apparently, Stack Overflow did some kind of assessment of this, and the yardstick was the ratio of likes and dislikes listed in developer story profiles to merit some kind of chart position. And the topic or tag in question had to show up in at least 2,000 stories. So basically, from this kind of assessment, they found out that Perl and Microsoft projects are generally disliked by developers. Further down on the list of unloved programming languages comes PHP, Objective-C, CoffeeScript, and Ruby, which I thought was quite surprising. I just thought it was kind of interesting. And the least disliked tags are R, Rust, TypeScript, and Kotlin. Never heard of Kotlin.
Kotlin's the new hotness on Android.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that R is because no one uses it, so they've never seen this tag.
Nobody has any opinion of R. It's that dull.
That's not true. People who do use it love it to bits. Nobody dislikes it.
That's true, yeah. I'm being mean.
I think this is the point about like the Microsoft stuff, that there are lots of people out there who dislike technology from Microsoft, whereas there aren't people who really dislike Python, say. They're kind of indifferent to it.
Yeah.
But there's an awful lot of people who do like Microsoft stuff, right? There's still the majority of desktops by miles. Still most of the programming by miles.
Let's not forget there were websites that were dedicated to bashing Microsoft even when they made free software in the past. And they still make free software, and people still bash them. You know, I get that Microsoft don't do everything perfectly, and they've made some mistakes in the past. They seem to be doing things a lot better recently. So,
I agree.
But people have long memories, especially the greybeards. Remember that time when they tried to upgrade Novell NetWare 3.1.2 and DR-DOS wasn't, that kind of stuff. People remember that stuff, unfortunately.
There are certainly people who will say things like, DOS ain't done till Lotus won't run. When that happened, allegedly, 20 years before these people were born. It's like, fine. If you've got arguments, then fight about them today, but stop fighting not even the last war. So the war before the war before the last war.
Those people who are dying off, those people who hated Microsoft because of the dark MS-DOS and DR-DOS days, are those the same people who like Perl and they're just dying off, and the youngsters just don't get introduced to Perl at all? I mean, there's no main project that I can think of right now that I really, would need my Perl skills for.
No.
The only thing
there was
I can
some
think
video
of,
converter that I remember that was written in Perl.
There are a couple of things that you would use that use Perl, but neither of which you'd hack on. One of them is a whole bunch of depackage stuff is done in Perl, and Debian packaging and so on. But the other thing is Shutter, the screenshot tool. The important thing about Perl is that Perl 6 is out and no one cares. Right? It's been out for a while and nobody's using it. And it does seem to be actually quite good, but they just can't drum up any interest around it.
And you're right. Shutter is a super cool application, and yes, you would not know that it was written in Perl. Yeah. Until about recently, when they said they're looking for developers to help them port to GTK3. And as I understand it, it's not actually Shutter that needs porting to GTK3. It's all the underlying Perl stuff that's never been ported to GTK3.
Right.
And nobody knows how to interface that Perl stuff or cares enough, or they all hate it.
Community.
I think what suggests that this is just, the older generation kind of either dying off, retiring, or moving on, is that the next two in the most disliked languages in this list were Delphi and VBA.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, these are crusty old languages that no one really cares about anymore. I would say,
a lot of the stuff that people are pointing out and saying, I hate this, does seem to be hangover small-tons. PHP is a perfectly good example. People are like, I hate PHP, it's terrible, it's unstructured, it's useless and everything. And you're like, yeah, it was in 2004, but modern PHP is actually really good. I mean, to be clear, people who hate CoffeeScript are entirely right and justified, and they should. That's fine. Everything else on this list.
Is that list extensive? Does it also have DBase 3 and Basic on there as well?
Probably aren't enough people out there who explicitly declare their hatred for DBase 3.
I might sign up to Stack Exchange so that I can post one question and then get hated. Brilliant.
But yeah, it does slightly feel like a lot of this stuff is historical dislikes being carried through into the modern age. You say, if you look at these things today, they've listened to a lot of your complaints in a lot of these cases.
And stuff goes, long memories. And stuff goes in cycles anyway,
It does. Look, this is spoiler alert, technology moves on. All right, Langridge, give us something newsy.
Google Drive have locked some people's documents from being shared because they're violations of the terms of service. So these are at least a couple of people. One woman, Rachel Bale, her name was, described her document as a draft of a story about wildlife crime. Someone else was writing a piece on Eastern European post-socialist parties, and these documents have been blocked from being shared. And they get a little pop-up thing which says, this item has been flagged as inappropriate and can no longer be shared. Now, it's possible that this is a bug which detects the wrongness in documents, right? It might get fixed. It's not very clear at the moment. But it is, I mean, we've railed in the past about the idea of outsourcing your whole world to the cloud or to IoT or whatever. But this is kind of slightly concerning, no? Just the idea that something might reach in and go, that document, no, you can't have it anymore. You can't show it to anyone anymore. Imagine if that happened 5 minutes for you to do a presentation, or it happened to our show notes or something, right? I was actually a tiny little bit worried that if I wrote about this in the show notes would themselves get locked.
But,
oh, come on.
But one of the replies was from a Google.
No, I don't think someone is sitting there going, I don't approve of this document about Eastern European socialist parties. I'm sure it's AI. A bug in some Python script in the AI somewhere. Right. But that's exactly the point. That doesn't happen if you've got them on your computer, because it can't. We're opening ourselves up to a whole new area of things. Yeah,
I agree. Software on your computer, bug free.
Also, stuff should never leave your computer. It should only ever stay on your computer. You should never email anything to anyone. You should never share a video.
I agree, yeah.
It should all stay.
Yeah, good work, Grandad.
Locked up on your Commodore 64 and all the cassettes that are stacked up next to it and never leave. Right?
This is your reason.
Popey, we want you on this show more often, please.
I'm sorry.
I think demonstrates...
If you read the terms and conditions and you're using a third-party site and you flout those terms and conditions, buyer beware. No,
but this is the point. They aren't flouting the terms and conditions.
Have you read them?
The documents?
No,
well,
the terms and conditions.
Yes. Yes, I have.
You did?
Yeah, of course I did. Research.
And which of the terms?
Hang on, you say that, but you don't normally do research. So
what were they supposed to have flouted?
Jono Bacon. What
were they supposed to have flouted? What does it just?
It doesn't tell you.
You've broken
it doesn't tell you. It says this
item
item has been flagged as inappropriate, and it's entirely unclear. As I say, I'm confident this is a bug somewhere. They've got a thing which looks for pornography or hate speech or something, or people using Google Drive as a hosting service to push out stuff that they don't want out there, and so something identifies this, which is not a bad idea, right? And I'm sure this is a bug which is improperly flagging some documents as inappropriate. The point is, this feels to me like those people who get their PayPal account locked when they didn't do anything wrong, and the PayPal people are like, yeah, well, we'll just fix it for you if you can get through to a person and get them to listen to you and so on. And meanwhile, you're screwed.
Right.
It's a whole new way of software screwing us up, which didn't exist before.
And I'll agree that this is a common problem with hosted services, specifically from Google, who are putting a lot of their faith in their magic machine learning unicorn algorithms, which clearly don't work well right now in mid to late 2017. They've done the same thing with people who've put YouTube videos up, and they've suddenly been flagged as inappropriate for monetization. And Google have announced
that's a whole.
Yeah, they've announced that this is partly because their machine learning algorithms aren't clever enough, and you coercing them by pressing a button and saying, "Actually, could you please review this?" They then review it and find actually there's nothing wrong with that video, but you're then teaching their machine learning. What is a good video and what's a bad video. So we are beta testing their software for them.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like, you know how everyone thinks that backups aren't that important until they get burned once and then you start caring. Yeah. This feels like slightly like one of those things where you're like, you're just being paranoid about the cloud until you get burned the one time. I mean, imagine if your email account got locked for a day. Right? That would be catastrophic to your business, potentially.
You know what? I agree with you. I completely agree with you. And look, if we break this into two areas, one is any kind of policy that they might have potentially around what kind of content is acceptable. And then the second thing is bugs in software. I think we all agree that like the software should operate flawlessly, and hopefully this is a bug and they'll get it fixed. And yes, bugs happen in software, it's annoying, but that's just the way it is. We live in a pretty connected world now, and people are using these cloud services a lot. All three of us are using them.
Yeah.
That's just kind of the way it is, and hopefully it'll get better. And to be fair to Google, I think they do a reasonable job. The problem, of course, here is that you always notice the jobs, the bugs. You don't always necessarily notice when things are going right, and I think they do a good job a lot of the time. The second area, which to me is more interesting, and let's assume good faith here that they don't have any kind of nefarious restrictions around content. To me, the canary in the coal mine for these kinds of things is the rights of journalists. Like when journalists have problems writing a story, it's like restrictions in what kind of content you can access on the internet. Like if a journalist is wanting to access the dark web to do a story for the New York Times about something, then that they should be able to do that. But I can understand there's an appetite to restrict, potential terrorists or child molesters or pedophiles or whatever it might be. But that first thing, I think we lack any information to make any kind of reasonable commentary on it outside of just dog whistle. No, Google are trying to restrict us all. The thing that does worry me is what we're seeing on YouTube, to Popey's point, is I'm personally of the view of, I watch a lot of videos on YouTube with some people who I completely agree with and some people who I completely disagree with, because I want to hear both sides of the argument. And people on both sides of this fence are getting their videos demonetized. They're not necessarily taken down, but they're getting them demonetized. People who have, I'm not talking about like hate speech or anything like that, but people who have either very left-wing views or very right-wing views are getting the videos demonetized. And that's worrying to me, because I think we should be able to entertain lots of opinions, so long as they're respectful and they don't incite any kind of violence.
Right, those opinions are still there. It's the problem is that they're not getting paid to produce that content. The video is still there. It's not like the video disappears off the internet.
Exactly.
It's not like it's censored away. But the person is no longer getting paid in order to produce that, which makes it no longer viable for them.
It's kind of genius from if there is, assuming not the best, assuming the worst, if there is some kind of goal inside of Google to moderate content and types of content in some way, they would know that just taking the videos down or banning people is a very, very controversial move. But demonetizing them effectively drives those businesses up. And there isn't really any good, because a lot of these people are very. I'll give you an example. There's a guy called Mark Dice, and he's the guy's bit of a nutcase, right? He's like he believes that the Illuminati exists in Hollywood, and that he's a real right wing, is full on Donald Trump fan. And I disagree with 98% of what this guy says. Occasionally, there's a flicker of wisdom in what he says, and he's having his videos demonetized all the time. And I think his business is based on YouTube. So if all of them get demonetized, he's not going to be able to do it anymore. He's going to have to rely on something like Patreon. Do
you guys ever get those Google AdSense vouchers through the post? Like a thing that offers you $25 worth of AdSense advertising. I don't know if you've... No? You're looking blankly at me. Okay, so...
I've had them once or twice, I think, but not regularly.
So, Jono, as a small business owner, you get one of these and you sign up and you want to put adverts on Google's platform targeting people who might be interested in Jono Bacon consulting. Would you be happy with those adverts appearing on Nazi propaganda or Antifa or whoever you see as bad person in inverted commas? Would you be happy with your brand being associated with those products, with those videos? Because that's the problem.
I'm in two minds about this. On one hand, like a purely unemotional, objective view, I don't really care. I think if people see that brand and a Nazi comes knocking on my door asking me to help build the Stormfront community, I'm just going to say no to them. But on the other hand, the thing that would worry me more is that people who don't know how Google advertising works, like if you know how Google advertising works, it's not really an issue because you can basically say, well, that's just what people are looking at. If people don't know how that works, which I would argue most people don't know how that works, they will then associate my brand with Nazis.
Which is exactly the point. It's not about the Nazi who comes knocking on your door. It's about all the other people who don't come knocking on your door because you're a Nazi supporter, because you advertise on their video.
And this is one of the reasons why, and I know this is turning to a big segment, but this is one of the reasons why I think when people talk about, for example, in the US, everyone talks about the Second Amendment with gun rights, and everybody talks about, the First Amendment with speech rights. Everybody talks about it in such isolated terms, right? Like there's this comedian, Jim Jeffries, does this brilliant bit about gun control where he basically says, have guns that you want, but as part of living in a society, you have to make concessions. So society operates, right? And part of those concessions is that you don't have access to certain firearms. So I think some people will look at these debates in the first version of my response to the Google Ads thing, which is, well, objectively, blah, 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 blah. But life isn't that simple, right? Yes, objectively, people should be able to have firearms. And if they use those firearms fairly and safely, then let them have as many firearms as they want. But in reality, that's not the way it works. We have a large mental health problem in the US. People do go into schools and casinos and shoot people. So
I like how we've gone from a Google Doc that was inaccessible due to a bug, probably, turns into gun control in the USA. Excellent.
Yeah. Badvoltage.org.
Then next.
All right. Popey, give us some sugar.
So the sugar is kind of related to the news story you said earlier about Stack Exchange. GitHub have published their regular State of the Octoverse 2017, which covers all the high-level stats about the site, developers, and users. You can see it at octoverse.github.com, and it's like the world's biggest infographic, constantly scrolling webpage with lots of numbers all over it. Some of the big numbers, headlines, 25 million users on GitHub, 1.5 million organizations, 67 million repositories, of which 25.3 million have had some activity since September 2016. So that's 25 million active repositories in the last year, which is pretty impressive.
That is.
Yeah, pretty good.
And related to your point about hated and loved languages, they have a table of which languages are most used by projects on GitHub, and by far and away the number one is JavaScript, to the point where it's twice as much as the number two, which is Python, followed closely by Java, Ruby, PHP, C++. And I notice on the top 15, Perl doesn't feature at all. In fact, shell scripts appear higher than Perl. So
that is a damning indictment of Perl. Right there.
Yeah, they also give tags for like what are most important categories of applications, and the big ones in the last year are machine learning, games, game platforms, and game toolkits, and iOS apps as well. So,
very cool. I have to say, what's interesting to me in this is the prevalence. I mean, I think we've always known that GitHub is very much a platform that I think primarily web developers are interested in. Like, there's a very strong kind of web developer base there and web designer base there.
No, I think that might be the case 3 or 4 years ago.
No, well, I would argue that the JavaScript stats would indicate that is still the case.
Node, like you think about Electron desktop applications. Nobody's writing apps in GNOME and GTK or Qt. Statistically speaking, nobody's writing apps in those languages. They're writing Electron apps, cross-platform Electron apps, and that's where that JavaScript is coming from.
I don't think that many people are writing Electron apps. I think people are writing web. I think people are writing web apps for sure. People using JavaScript and Node and whatever else. But I don't think
if you look at the projects with the most contributors, VS Code is number one. React Native, NPM, Angular, CLI, all of those are JavaScript, aren't they?
Yeah. So, but that's what I'm saying is what's interesting to me about this is if you've got 25.3 million repos that have had active repos, which I care more about than the 67 million. If we can presume that most of those are some kind of web technology and JavaScript and whatever branches out from JavaScript, what that leads me to think is just think how many developers are in the world who aren't using GitHub, who are using crusty enterprise technology and whatever else. Or we know that Git is not particularly suitable for example, large game studios. Friend of the show, Lee Riley, was telling us about this a few weeks ago. Like, so it makes me think like there's a huge amount of work going on in GitHub, but there is so much more potential. Like that sounds like a lot, but let's not assume that that's not everything.
No, it's not the whole world. And I'd be interested to see stats from other places like GitLab, Launchpad, maybe SourceForge, where people host their code. Maybe not.
A lot of Perl users there.
That's where they are.
The other thing I wasn't sure about, and it may have said this in the Octoverse thing, and I looked and couldn't see it, but I think this only applies to public repositories.
Yes, I think you're right.
And outside the web and Linux desktop software, there's not as much of a culture of open sourcing things. I mean, there are millions and millions and millions of game developers out there, for example, but they're not open sourcing their code because they're not allowed to. or they don't want to because they want to sell it to someone, or because it's part of the latest PlayStation 4 game or whatever.
Or you think of big companies like Google who host all their stuff internally. There's no way all their internal code is on GitHub. It's on their internal stuff.
So pursuing if you were GitHub and you think, well, there's loads of developers who aren't part of this culture, and we should get them onto GitHub, you could do that, but they'd be like, well, what's our benefit in using GitHub? It might be for private repositories, and it would be really interesting to see what the figures are for private repositories and whether they're much more skewed away from things like web technologies.
One of the things that I think would be interesting here is, I think one of the biggest challenges for GitHub right now is going to be bridging into that enterprise market, because there is no doubt that in the open source world, in our world, GitHub is just, it's such a major brand, right? Everybody knows what GitHub is, and people love GitHub, and as they should. It's brilliant. One of the things that's been interesting from my perspective, working with companies around, particularly like big companies around inner source, is a lot of these big companies, like big banks and financial institutions, they've kind of heard of it, but it's really not a very resonant thing for people. And a lot of those companies naturally sway towards GitLab because GitLab is cheaper because it's free if you get the open source edition, and B, because it's open source, it's like integrating it for an experiment is easier. And I think GitHub are going to need to try and tend to that to kind of address it. Otherwise, I worry that GitLab is going to steal their lunch a little bit.
There are also regulatory issues here, right? A lot of companies can't host their internal software elsewhere, and an awful lot more of them don't want to. And whereas you can run your own instance of GitLab, and a lot of people do. A lot of the clients I work with are using GitLab with half a dozen projects in it, but it's hosted internally.
Exactly.
It's because the whole idea of, we'll take our source code, which is our primary intellectual property asset, and then stick it on some server in another country. Why would we do this? And it's hard to make a case that there's any major value in doing that when it's a private repository anyway. You're not getting any benefit from opening it up.
On that note, as I mute my phone because it's making noises.
Okay, Google, mute the phone.
Headphones, idiot. I've got headphones on.
Oh, yeah.
So,
everyone who's listening's just got a phone that doesn't work now.
Let's do that. I actually was chatting to someone who shall remain unnamed, who works in the financial services world, who was telling me that for them, every comment on a GitHub issue, or GitLab issue, whatever, publicly, has to have a legal review. So for some of those industries, I think it's going to be interesting how, to me, that's something you could solve to a reasonable degree with workflow. Right. You could have a position where somebody needs to respond to a public issue and it gets routed through a legal team and they do some whatever on it. But,
it wasn't that long ago I worked in pharmaceuticals, and all of the processes that we had to go through were handwritten and had to be reviewed, and if we made any mistakes, we had to throw that piece of paper away and rewrite it handwritten. So the idea of putting this stuff electronically out on the web is just completely alien to them.
Wow.
It may have changed in recent years, but certainly when I was involved in the legal industry, the idea that you take all the source code we were doing and put it on a server in another country was a massive thundering no-no, and there's no way that was going to happen. Like, it took me a year and a half to get a Subversion server allowed, for God's sake. And that was running on the machine under my desk.
So I have one more story to share.
Go.
Which some of you may have seen. So this is, I think, a demonstration of stupidity. So Apple have fired an engineer after his daughter leaked an iPhone. Is it X or is it 10? I don't. Is it 10?
It's 10.
Are you sure?
Yes, because they go 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
X.
but then it was macOS 10 as well, and no one cared about that either.
Right. Yes.
That's true. So I'm going to refer to it as iPhone X because 10 is weird to me. So the original video, which has since been taken down, showed off a bunch of new features of the iPhone X/10, such as Apple Pay, shots from inside of Apple's cafeteria, and even shots of the dude Bauer who handed the phone to the daughter in the video. Apparently, this guy was the self-described RF guy at Apple. Okay, so making Apple devices work with old televisions, I'm assuming. So
it just stands
maybe
for
not.
radio frequency, you moron.
No, it's
Where do I plug my aerial into this phone? That's my problem. They've taken away the headphone socket, but where do I put my UHF cable? That's what I want to know.
You see, when they said you were holding it wrong, what you were supposed to do was unwind a wire coat hanger and poke it in the headphone socket at the top. But you can't do that anymore because they haven't got a headphone socket, so that's okay.
But I just why on earth did this person think that this was okay? I mean, what?
I think there's multiple levels of screw up here.
Yes.
Like having your daughter, into work for lunch, that's pretty reasonable, and that seems okay.
Enough.
Getting out a device which isn't on the market yet. I mean, you could be forgiven for thinking that, there have been announcements, it's been shown off in lots of places, it's almost public knowledge. I mean, the fact that the people who were to review this device were only given it 24 hours before it went on public sale meant that they were trying to keep this stuff internal. So he should have known that. He should have been aware of, the NDA under which he's working and not show this thing. I mean, showing it off to a mate in the pub is one thing. Sitting in your employer's cafe and having someone record a video of it is a whole different kettle of fish.
I think it's the recording the video thing. I mean, I can imagine doing something like that with my daughter and showing it to her and giving her a sneak peek. But if she whipped out a phone and started filming, I'd be like, no, that's not what happens now. Put that away. Put that away.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay to show it off in the pub so long as you don't leave it in the pub. Do you remember that some years back?
I do. I do remember that.
All right.
Yeah, so as Popey says, really, sort of multiple levels of screw up here. I mean, and it seems harsh to fire the guy, but equally, I can see why Apple did it.
They're not exactly known for, openness when it comes to their products. They like the big hurrah when a product goes out the door. They want to make the most of that marketing opportunity, and having some lunatic on Instagram or wherever posting a blurry cam video, probably taken on a non-Apple device, who knows?
Yeah.
We could also delve into Langridge levels of conspiracy here and suggest that this was just a giant PR stunt. We're talking about it.
Could have been.
Could have been.
I don't think it was. But then
we'll leave that as an exercise for the listener to share on community.badvoltage.org. Was it a PR stunt? Anyway, Langridge, come on, give us some news. This is a very long news segment.
It is very.
We're near the end.
Very, very, very long news segment. No, mine's just my one to finish on is just kind of an amusing one, really. There was how can I describe him? A bellend. It's a good way of describing him. Also, a columnist for a world-famous newspaper in Windsor, outside London, who tweeted that nobody uses libraries. They should get shut down and moved into schools for children only, and that librarians are sad people who can't get proper work. He promptly got 110,000 replies from people saying libraries are great and you're a moron.
How on earth did he feel that was an appropriate thing to say out loud on the internet?
Which is exactly my point. I mean, this is more kind of utter hilariousness. That there are people out there who genuinely think, well, no one goes to the library, do they? It's just old people and kids.
Isn't this just the typical, I don't do that, therefore nobody does that?
Therefore, no. He's since backed down. He hasn't actually apologised for any of the things he said.
Having seen some of the replies that he got, I'm not surprised he backed down, because there were some relentless replies going on there.
He said he was clearly proved wrong about libraries not being popular. This is not so much news as just me laughing at this guy, but I thought it was instructive.
So devil's advocate question here, because I haven't personally been to a library probably since I was a kid.
Shows,
but I'm conscious. Thank you. I'm conscious of the fact that.
If we sew your index finger back on, you'd be able to read again, wouldn't you?
I'm conscious of the fact that, I'm in a position in life where I don't need to go to a library. I can buy books if I want to, right? And a lot of people who are less fortunate, they depend on going to a library to read books, to get books out. But since we had Jack, we take, our nanny, Daylene, picks him up from school because he finishes school at 2:30, and then she looks after him for a few hours, and she takes him to the library all the time, and he loves it.
Yeah.
And they do things at the library. They have reading sessions and whatever else. But I'd like to know how many people actually do use libraries. Whether this guy was saying, when he says nobody uses libraries, whether he says it in the same sense that we say things on this show, which is like, well, not as many people use libraries.
Nobody uses desktop Linux.
Right, like people clearly do use desktop Linux, but I'd be interested to know how many people are actively using libraries today, because I'm sure that it's less than it used to be because people have got more access to media than they used to. But I'd be interesting to know what proportion.
I also think that I think to counter argue that a library today is much more than the big warehouse full of books that it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. I mean, my daughter works in the library quite a lot. The public library here in Birmingham. She'll go off to do work and she'll sit in the library rather than sitting in her bedroom.
Because she's a sad person who can't get proper work.
It is. Yeah,
that's what this bell end said.
Yes, that's exactly it. Just God. But yeah, and they've got things like they've got loads of computers in them, so people who can't afford internet access themselves can go and use them, which is still something like 15 or 20% of people. Some outrageously high figure that I didn't believe. I'd have to look up the citation for that. And it might be
maybe that's just Birmingham.
No, I don't actually have UK figures at all. This was US figures.
Birmingham, Alabama.
I suspect it's less in the UK just because there's less officer things are more constant.
There's also a ton of other stuff that you get in the library. Like you can borrow old like tapes, audiobooks, music. You can also use it as a working space. So near me, there aren't a lot of cheap or low-cost co-working spaces, whereas I could just rock up to the library, sit down, get my laptop out, and I've got a quiet, pleasant environment, well-lit, clean environment that smells nice of old books. In which to work, which is almost impossible to get now.
Speaking as a guy without an office, I've had meetings in the library. If I need to meet someone somewhere in town, it's normally either a coffee shop or in the library, and the library's better because it's less noisy.
How are you able to keep your voice down in the library? I need to know this.
Can't be done.
The library is big enough that if you're just sitting having a conversation over a table, they're okay with that. It's not supposed to be silent. When they built snazzy New Birmingham Library, Sarah something was their head of PR or something like that, and she said library shouldn't be a place where you get told shh all the time. She wanted to hear the voices of people talking and enjoying themselves. You're not supposed to bring a bouncy castle in or anything, or go around on rollerblades. But
that would be hilarious.
but yeah, the whole point of this is if you got people conversing, that's a good thing. It's not meant to be this silent temple of books. So we've just had a new Ubuntu release. 17.10 Artful is now out.
Very exciting.
Ubuntu 17.10 is now with people who are using it. I personally am not using it because I'm an LTS user these days. Now I don't have to upgrade every 6 months. I do not do so. But it is useful that we have someone intimately involved with the whole process on the show.
We do indeed, yes. Mr. Pope.
Hello.
Ubuntu Ambassador. What is your official job title right now, Mr. Pope? Because you do a bit of everything,
It's Wednesday, isn't it? So today it's community advocate, we'll say.
This is a man without a job title.
I have multiple business cards with different job titles on.
Minister
like
without
Paul Manafort.
Not
without
like
the money.
Not like Paul Manafort.
So, I think this is a very exciting release. I mean, so I think we should talk about two different things here, because obviously Ubuntu, some people think of Ubuntu in terms of the desktop, some people think of it more on the server side, and I think some people obviously do think of the IoT side of things. Let's start with the desktop, because this was a big release for the desktop, because for those of you who've been living in a cave or are unfamiliar with Ubuntu, the desktop moved from Unity, which was the desktop environment that Ubuntu's been shipping for a long time, and X over to the GNOME shell with some pretty neat customizations to make it look and feel like Ubuntu, and it's running Wayland, which is the replacement for X, although there's an X backup session. And Unity is available somewhere in the archive, slowly rotting.
Well,
right. So,
yeah. So it ships with GNOME Shell, and this came about after Mark announced the end of Unity back in April 2017. and said we weren't going to focus on that, and we would ship a really polished GNOME shell-based desktop by default. So yes, Unity is still in the archive. You can apt install it very easily, and you can still switch to Unity. And you could argue that it's in maintenance mode, but you could argue that it's been in maintenance mode for the last 5 years. So it's not a lot different than you would have seen on 1604 anyway. Yeah. So for Unity users, there's not a lot of motivation. But if you want to try out the new GNOME shell, 1710 is the place to get it.
Now, I have to say, just from, I mean, obviously I haven't worked at Canonical for a while now, and I'm still friends with lots of people at Canonical, but watching what that development team who've been working on the desktop has done in the time leading up to this release, I think is an unbelievable feat of engineering.
So it was a real proper collaboration between the guys who work for Canonical on the desktop team, so Will Cook's team, people like Didier, Seb, Laney, and so on, but also people in the community as well. So Jeremy Bisha, who was mainly involved in the Ubuntu GNOME flavor leading up to 1710, we had an awful lot of help from him getting all the things lined up and all the right packages in the archive, everything, all the right versions of everything, so that it all just worked on release day and was themed correctly. And so brilliant. It was epic, given how short a time they had to from the announcement in April to getting the thing shipped and out the door in October. Is pretty impressive. And
it was nice to see Didier wrote a series of blog posts about it.
Those were brilliant. Leading up to, I read every single one of those.
And I found them fascinating. I like seeing some of the, the technical detail behind the scenes. It's not for everybody, obviously, but developer, right? So it's quite interesting to see talking publicly about how the decisions were made and why they were made and how they were done in collaboration.
Yeah.
And I really like, say, the doc at the side. I moved to GNOME Shell on top of Unity 1604 a little while ago, precisely because, on top of Ubuntu 1604, precisely because Unity was kind of in maintenance mode. But it
required an enormous amount of wittering at you, Langridge, to make that move.
It did require
from multiple different people.
It did. It really did.
Those blog posts were vital because it was really ambiguous. After the announcement from Mark in April, everyone in Canonical kind of went into hibernation while the whole redundancies and the downsizing shook out, and that took a little while. And the problem with that is there was a lot of speculation and misinformation and guesswork in the community, in the wider community, as to what 1710 would look like. And some of that came about because Mark's announcement kind of implied that it would be a stock vanilla GNOME shell and no changes whatsoever. And then once we looked into it a little, we thought, well, if you're coming from a previous release, which is Unity, we want to smooth that transition from Unity to GNOME shell. So let's tweak it a little bit with a very nicely curated set of extensions, which we crowdsourced a bunch of data. We did a couple of polls. Dustin Kirkland posted on Hacker News and Slashdot and Reddit and a bunch of other places, collated a load of data about how people use their Ubuntu desktop. And we did polls and gathered data from OMG Ubuntu and loads of other places. So we were really data-driven in what we did. It was okay for Mark to say our aspiration is to have a stock GNOME shell, but when you sit back and ask the users and really dig into what people actually need and want, we decided to put a couple of extensions on there to help smooth that process.
But nicely, they were extensions which already existed, and you work with the upstream of those extensions to say, this is what we want to do, how can we do it? Not just, we're going to take this and then go, ta-da, Ubuntu version.
Right, and we also attended Guardec. Sorry, Jono. We also attended Guardec and had plenty of discussions with the upstream GNOME people, so it wasn't a case of we're doing all of this in isolation. There were people in Canonical who were in constant communication with upstream GNOME as well as the developers, and so while outside the project, there were people throwing rocks telling us we were doing it wrong and we weren't talking to the right people. Behind the scenes, we were doing exactly the right thing, talking to exactly the right people and making sure everyone was all lined up and we were doing the right thing.
I have to say, when I saw Mark's announcement about the Convergence initiative being retired, I too also was of the view that it was going to ship a relatively stock, GNOME shell with a few little tweaks here and there. I was not expecting the level of work that went into it. And what really resonated for me was, look, I think the Canonical design team have, and obviously in conjunction with some great designers in the community, have done an amazing job over the years in terms of the design, the look and the feel of Ubuntu. Not just the desktop, but also the website and all the marketing materials and everything. And I just to see what has been produced in that release, I think is just breathtaking. And it was, and it's great to see that collaboration between Upstream. Canonical received a lot of heat over the years about not working with upstreams, and what a giant step in the right direction. And a lot of that heat, I think, was unwarranted and unjustified, but some of it was warranted and justified. And I think that no one can look at this release without being impressed.
Yeah, the theme. I mean, with theming and stuff, you're always going to have a mixed bag of reactions, and some people want a proper stock experience, and that's fine. And we actually ship a package in the archive called GNOME Session. So if you really, really don't like the orange accents and the launcher on the left-hand side and the little modifications we've done, then apt install GNOME Session and log out, log back in, and you get a stock GNOME experience. So if you want that, you can have it, and it's really easy. And the desktop team took incredible care to make sure that whatever they did in the Ubuntu session, the one that's like skinned for Ubuntu and has the extensions, didn't adversely affect things in the GNOME session. So you wouldn't get bleed over from one session to the other. And that's kind of hard to do because GNOME isn't really designed to be modified in the way we modified it. So we had to kind of bend things a little bit to get it working the way we did. And that was challenging in itself. And we had a desktop sprint in London, which was just a few of us working through some of those theming issues. And it was quite a challenge, shall I say, to theme GNOME Shell and find all the instances where the little blue accents are and the highlights and things in order to tweak those to make them look more Ubuntu-like. That was quite challenging work.
I imagine there's just a million little problems that you have to solve in something like that to make it look right.
So, a question. You're very data-driven about making the decisions which led to the... How do you refer to it? The Ubuntu flavour of GNOME Shell or the Ubuntu session? Or what's the
we call it the Ubuntu session.
Right, so you're very data-driven in working out what should be included and what shouldn't, whether people wanted icons here or didn't want them, whether they wanted launcher on the left or they didn't, so on and so forth. Are you doing the same thing now that it's out there with actually gathering people's opinions on it? One of the things I really liked about you being very data-driven about it is that it was done in public, not just we're asking the questions in public, but you collated the results in public and they were largely published in public, and the decisions that were taken, you were able to point at documents that we could all see and say, this is why we're making this decision because loads of people like it and here's our backup for this. Look, in the past, because a lot of decisions have been made internally and they were designed behind a vision rather than behind largely what people were asking for, there was much less in the way of we're doing this and this is our demonstration twice. We're doing this because we believe it's the right thing to do. So now you've got the option of saying, now we've done this, are people actually happy with it? Right. And if they are happy with it, can we prove it? And so on. And are there plans for that sort of thing? Be cool if there were.
Yeah, I think so. But what you got to remember is that 1804 is an LTS. And so we can't, we've moved everyone's cheese between 1704 and 1710. I don't think it makes sense for us to move everything again. I think we will iterate on and improve and refine and bug fix what's in 1710 in order for 1804 to be like as perfect as we can get it. I don't think we're going to look for any wholesale big changes. We'll use the lessons we've learned for 1710 and reuse those for 1804. But yeah, we do need to gather feedback from people about...
and that was announced, right? That the next release is going to be iterative, as it should be. I mean, the releases leading up to an LTS historically have been... Not very exciting, as they shouldn't be. It's about stability and security.
But also, we've got things like new technologies in there that we've never had as default. So, for example, having Wayland by the default session, we need to work out whether that's working out for people and whether Wayland is ready for an LTS release. Because remember that we have a significantly higher number of users who sit on LTS releases and only upgrade when the pop-up comes up to say it's time to upgrade. And that won't actually happen. Yeah, me too. And that won't actually happen until like June, July next year. So we don't offer the upgrade until the 0.1 release. So we need to make sure that we've got 1804 ready, and then any polish that we need to do on 1804, then the people who are on 1604 get offered the upgrade around July or thereabouts. So I don't think we want to do significant changes for 1804, but if there are things we learn from 1710, yeah, totally, we'll.
I have a question for you, Popey, about that. So, and you will have some information that you can and can't share about this, so I don't want to put you in a weird position, but with LTSs, do not question for a second the value of an LTS from a cloud server perspective. People just don't want to upgrade that often. But I wonder, given the fact that Linux on the desktop has got, let's say, if we're being generous, 3 to 4%, or maybe 5% of market share, I'm presuming that most people who are using Linux on the desktop, all Linuxes, Ubuntu included, are going to be primarily probably enthusiasts, is what I would assume. Do we think that people are really, most people, I mean, there are exceptions, obviously, are going to be upgrading every couple of years? I would have imagined that most enthusiasts want the hot new stuff every 6 months. So do you have any sense of what that proportion is and how many people are actually using the LTSs as opposed to upgrading every 6 months with the desktop?
Yeah, it's significant. And it, depending upon the LTS and depending upon how you compare the LTS to non-LTSs, it's between 10 and 20 times the number of people run LTS than non-LTS. So it's a
really,
yes, it's
so
significant.
on the desktop. 5 to 10% of people are running the interim releases, and the other 90 to 95% are running LTSs, like me.
Yeah.
What's breathtaking to me about that? And I'm not suggesting that's wrong because that's the data.
Don't forget, I can give you a couple of reasons why that is. One is corporate environments, people tend to be on LTSs, and a lot of people target their software for LTSs because they know people are sticky on LTSs. The other thing is, don't forget that by default, LTSs don't even offer you an upgrade until the next LTS. So if you did nothing but installed 1604, you just get your regular updates. Yeah. And if you weren't a nerd, you wouldn't know to go and fiddle some text file or flick a tick box somewhere. You'd just keep getting updates, and you'd be happy that 2 years later, 2.5 years later, you're still getting updates and everything's tickety-boo.
That's a good point.
And then 2.5 years after you installed it, a box comes up and says, "Hey, yo, there's a new LTS. Do you want to come and get a new version?"
So with an LTS, everyone gets the box.
Yeah.
But with a non-LTS, only the non-LTS people get the box.
Yeah.
Which is going to, like, if I'm running an interim release, I'll get the box to say, "Do you want to upgrade to the next interim release?"
Pretty much as soon as the release goes out, yeah.
Right, but LTS users won't get that. They'll only get the box with the next LTS release. So that does skew the data a little bit. But
also people are sticky, like super sticky. Like we extended the support window for 1204, and like think how ancient 1204. 1204 shipped with Unity 3D and the old cute Unity 2D. That's how old that is. It's like 5 years old.
Yeah.
And people are still running that, and it's still supported, and it's still got updates in the archive, security updates, and all that good stuff. And people are still sat on that, and we had to extend the support window for that because people want to stay on it.
So, moving on a little bit, tell us about Snappy, because obviously there's been a lot of talk about Snappy in recent years. Oh, hang on, we just lost Langridge. Oh, he's back. What happened there, Langridge?
Not sure. Things dropped off the network. I'm still rolling here, though.
Good. Excellent. Keep rolling. Yeah. All right. Little bit behind-the-scenes magic there for you listeners. So
you can cut this bit out.
No,
yes, you can. You lazy snipe. It's your job.
Listeners, you have just heard them shouting at each other and not edited out.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, so obviously there's been a lot of talk in recent years about Snappy within the context, really within the context of both, right? We hear about it a lot from Mark when he's doing keynotes, and I think primarily within the context of like a cloud or a server setting. But Snappy is obviously very important on the desktop side of things as well, and this new version of Ubuntu ships with it. So what do you see as, tell us a little bit about Canonical's view of Snappy and where it fits into the desktop as well as how it fits into the server side of things and what it looks like in this new release. Because I think I have a good understanding of it. I think I do. Maybe I don't. But I don't think necessarily most of our listeners do.
So I think there's one popular misconception about Snaps is that it's only for IoT or only for server or only for cloud deployments. And we just don't see it like that. We see Snaps as a way of delivering the latest version of applications to users no matter what platform they're on, whether they're a little IoT device that's sat on the end of a pole in the middle of a field that you can't ever go to, or whether it's in a data center, or whether it's a laptop or a desktop or a Raspberry Pi or a Maker, you can deliver snaps to any of them. So we're not targeting specifically IoT or server. In fact, more recently, the things that I've been talking to developers about have been desktop applications. So, we've been talking to people like Skype and Slack and, people who make prominent top tier applications, which everyone wants on their desktop. So, no, it's not IoT.
I have to say on that note, when Mark wrote his post about the Ubuntu desktop kind of returning to upstream, GNOME and whatever else, that was my assumption as well, was that, snaps are primarily for the server, for the IoT side of things. And Mark made it very clear that was not the case, that this is everything. So
one of the things that Ken's been doing, Ken Van Dyne, who works on the desktop team, has been working on snapping the upstream GNOME applications. And the reason why that's quite cool is that he's snapped GNOME itself as a platform snap. So you can install a platform snap that contains the core libraries that make up the GNOME experience. And then snapping each of the GNOME applications, like the latest version of GNOME applications, will connect to that platform snap and reuse stuff in the platform snap. Similar to the way Flatpak have a similar system of splitting things out between Flatpaks, right? But one of the nice things is, because we've backported snapd, the daemon that makes it work, back to 16.0, it's in 16.04 and back to 14.04. That means that if you are one of those many sticky users on 14.04, you could get the very latest 3.26, 3.28, whatever the next version of GNOME is, those applications all the way back on a version of Ubuntu that shipped 3 years ago, which is something that is really painful to do as devs. Like, you have to rebuild stuff and you replace loads of fundamental parts of your system if you wanted that to happen. With snaps, because they're isolated, that doesn't happen. So
that was a really nice trick.
Which is brilliant.
GNOME recipes, for example, was apparently reputedly built in order to test that Flatpak worked and test out lots of corner cases in Flatpak. And now it's snapped and it runs on Ubuntu 14.04. I think that's quite cool.
Right.
So, Popey, you're obviously much closer to the Snappy world than we are, and some people who are listening to this will have heard of Snappy and Flatpak in the same conversation. What would you say are, like, if you were to explain why people should think more about Snappy than Flatpak? What would you say the main?
I don't
reasons?
Usually have confrontational style with this versus that. I can talk about, like. And especially,
the respective benefits.
I'm not an expert on Flatpak, right? I know it exists and I know a bit about it and I've used it a little bit. But I can tell you about snaps from my perspective. Like, having one snap that works across, like, let's be brutal here, the vast majority of Linux desktops are running Ubuntu. Like, and those people are running LTS, 16.04 or 14.04. There are some people who are running the interim releases. There are also a bunch of people running Linux Mint. There are some people who run Fedora, Debian, Arch, OpenSUSE, right? Having the ability to create one software package and it work across all of those is really compelling for a software developer, especially a small software developer who's creating an application in their spare time, building up a business, creating their app. They don't have loads of packages. They don't have loads of people who can help them do all this stuff. If they can create one YAML file and that results in a package that works across millions of machines, that's a compelling argument. If also there's an update mechanism that means that they can just push their changes to GitHub and it gets built and pushed out to all those users automatically, and the users don't even have to think about it, much in the same way that I have no clue what version of Spotify I have on my desktop, and I have no idea what version of Spotify I have on my phone. I just know I've got the latest version. And that's a compelling argument for developers to know that they don't have this long tail. Like, think of the X screensaver problem, where there's some old, crusty, ancient version of X screensaver in Debian, and the upstream developer keeps getting emails from people who are saying, oh, I'm running X screensaver and it crashes. And he either opts to support them or not, and that's a burden for him. And if you can get rid of that burden of having to support hundreds of old versions of point releases of your software from the past, and you can just have one version that is the supported version. That's a compelling argument.
So,
it seems like it seems.
I'm an app developer, right? So I would like to be able to go, here is my app, here is the thing that you need to click on or download, and then you get it for Linux, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, if I do it as a snap, then that will work on a bunch of existing desktops, and there's work going on to make it happen on others. If I do it as a flatpak, it'll work on a bunch of existing desktops, and there's work done. How far are we away from the point where I can just go, here is a link to the Snap store, and then it will basically work for everyone if they're prepared to perhaps install a dependency or something first? Or are we essentially never going to hit that point, and you're always going to have to distribute both Snap and a Flatpak?
It's tricky. We're trying to make that as frictionless as possible, and there is a web UI where you'll get a page that you can send people to, and that already exists. So your application, foobar you would go to snapcraft.io/foobar and that's like a storefront for your application. It will show screenshots and the icon and the summary, the text summary, which is a bit like the iTunes page for an application or the Play Store page. And there's a big green install button. And if you're running on a system that has Snapd, pressing that green install button should result in the application being installed. If it doesn't, it's a bug or it's a missing feature and we need to fix it. But that's the end goal, is there is a page, you click a button, you install the thing.
Yeah.
But getting it on other distros, yes, that's hard.
That's the question.
It's tricky. We have a lot of experience of packaging up software for Ubuntu. We've got Debian developers who work in the company. We've got people who've been packaging software for Ubuntu for more than 10 years, and so we know how to do that. And targeting Ubuntu first is a no-brainer for Canonical, the commercial sponsor of the Ubuntu project, right? But it's actually hard for us to do that in other projects for a number of reasons. Some of them are political. We get a bit of friction from some people. We get some pushback from some people who say, I don't want that. But we try. We're trying to follow the rules in all those other distros and trying to follow their policy.
I don't think you should as well. I honestly think, just my personal view, I think Canonical and the Ubuntu community should focus on making Ubuntu best and contribute to upstream projects as you're doing with GNOME and Wayland and things like that, and that's great. And participating in the ecosystem. And I can understand the desire to get snaps running on these other platforms, but I think that's going to be a really hard.
It's hard. The developers who we speak to, that is one of the questions they ask us. So I will, drop an email to a developer of a brand new application that I've seen pop up on Hacker News, and I'll contact them and say, hey, I noticed that you've got Windows binary and Mac binary, and your Linux instructions are, curl this, apt install that, build it from source, which is, crap, frankly. So how about you package it as a snap, and then you get to target a whole bunch of additional users, and it's easy for them, and also you get metrics on how many downloads and all that kind of good stuff as well.
So I agree with you, but let's break this into two areas. One is going to be generating revenue for Canonical, and the second area is going to be technology that works really well and solves problems, right? To me, one of the things I think is really cool about Snappy is, first of all, I think the GitHub integration is genius. The fact that you can push to GitHub, it will build your snap, and it will be released is how it should be, particularly in today's world of CI/CD and all the rest of it. But secondly, the fact that Ubuntu is not just a desktop, it is IoT and it is the cloud, means that I think the one of the major reasons why Ubuntu is the most prominent operating system in the cloud these days is because of the desktop. I think the desktop got people aware of Ubuntu, and then that brand has continued as Canonical and other people have built out the cloud and server stuff. And so I think
but we recognize, I agree with you, but we recognize that oranges are not the only fruit, and there are other options out there that people do choose, and we want to make sure that our stuff works. And I don't want to say to a developer, you can make a snap and you will hit all of these users. You'll hit all of Ubuntu. There's potentially Debian and Linux Mint. But, oh, by the way, you've still got to make Debs. Or, oh, by the way, you've still got to make a tarball and a curl thing.
That's precisely the point, I think. If I'm distributing software, I want to be able to go, Windows, click this link. Mac, click this link. Linux, click this link. If I might be prepared to say, what I'm going to say is Windows, click this, Mac, click this, Ubuntu, click this, and not have anything for non-Ubuntu users.
That's common already, actually.
It is quite common, and I might be prepared to do that, but a lot of people aren't necessarily prepared to do that, which means that if I can't say, Linux, click this link and provide a snap, I'm going to go, well, what do I need to provide? And what I get is what I get now, which is some kind of downloadable self-unpacking bash script.
The other flip
or
side,
low-key setup.
the flip side to this is, like, you talk to some developers of very high-profile Tier 1 applications, and they will say, our telemetry tells us that actually you are a blip. You don't deserve my time. Linux in general. Like, now, if Linux in general is a fraction of a percent of their market, then why would they spend significant engineering effort making multiple packages for all the different distros if all of them together make up fuck all, and then within that, some niche distro that someone chooses to run, which may be beautiful and amazing and the most well-engineered desktop in the world, but it's a percentage of a fraction of a percentage. And can I justify putting in the engineering effort to target that one guy on his distro, or do I target these millions of people elsewhere?
But this is honestly like what this is where I kind of come back. Like, this is where the revenue piece kind of comes in for me. Is I think we all want Ubuntu to be successful, and we want Canonical to make money, so Canonical can continue to put the resources and everything else into Ubuntu and work with the community and all the rest of it. And it just strikes me that I get from the perspective of an app developer that they want their app to run everywhere. And I think that's an honorable goal for Canonical to pursue with Snappy. Absolutely honorable. But it just strikes me as like a lot of work. And if Ubuntu is certainly on both the cloud and the desktop is the prevailing and dominant platform, honestly, if I was at Canonical, I would just prioritize Ubuntu. It makes it, you won't solve all problems that app developers want. They want it working everywhere. But honestly, from a perspective, just finish off from a perspective of building something that is valuable for the Ubuntu and Canonical ecosystem, to me, this is I would, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I would position it as this is a unique piece of value that you offer in Ubuntu, because the tricky thing with, as we've seen over the years with the Linux distribution space, is it's difficult to differentiate, right? That was the whole point of Unity and Mir and everything, was to differentiate Ubuntu, to make it a little different, to make it something more unique, but working in a collaborative way with other upstream projects. Now, and I think there's an opportunity to do that with Snappy, like particularly as I can absolutely see the case where someone who loves Ubuntu on the desktop, right? And then they end up building a business and they need to start distributing stuff to the cloud. They've got this technology that they've already been using on the desktop that they can then use in the cloud and vice versa. Like, I don't know.
The problem is right now at the moment, if I want to find a downloadable link for Linux for my software, I can't. I wouldn't feel comfortable making that a link to the Snap Store, because I think some people who think great you support Linux will find that it doesn't work for them. Even if that's not the majority, those people are almost certainly more vocal. So the people who will have called for a Linux port of your software will then go, but that's not a Linux port, that's an Ubuntu port.
Yeah, but now, the vocal people are not always right, are they? In fact, they're often wrong.
I agree they're not always right, but since you're already essentially doing people a favour by shipping on Linux anyway, I'd like to say it's a decent revenue stream for most people, but for most people it isn't. I mean, I've been using Scrivener, right, to write a book, and they did a Linux port. Basically,
hang on. You're writing a book?
Yeah, different.
Drop that in there.
Don't we have an agreement here? I appreciate the fact that I've broken this agreement multiple times, but
you have. Plus, it's not a technical book.
Oh, okay.
Which is why I'm using Scrivener, right? Which is not the right thing for a technical book at all.
Okay. Anyway, carry on.
The point is that Scrivener is commercial software for Mac and Windows. And it's quite good. Like, a bunch of real authors use it. There is a Linux version which they basically built for a laugh. Right, and one of their engineers went, I'm going to build this, and I'm going to build a Linux version. They're now on version 2 point something. They did it for version 1.7 and 1.9, and they went, okay, we're not going to do this. Right, we've decided we're not going to pursue this. We don't think there's enough of a market here, but here it is. You can download it. We're not going to support this if it doesn't work. But you're welcome to hang out in our forums and ask questions of one another, and it's free for you. It's not free software, but it's free of charge to download. But we're not going to continue this. We don't think it's worthwhile target for us. If you said to them, make that a snap, I think they'd have gone, well, don't really want to do that because we're already going, here's a favour to the Linux community. And if their forum is entirely
They're the
wrong,
edge case, though.
Don't forget,
in the
desktop
Linux
is just part of the story. Like, as I said,
it is,
it's only one part. So, for example, if you're a company and you develop some application that's suitable to go on base stations underneath like 3G antennas, and you've got loads of those thousands of those base stations deployed, and you want to have auto-updating application, and it's very targeted to a specific OS like Ubuntu Core, then it doesn't matter that you only provide it as a snap, because that's the only place it's ever going to run, right? So
that's the thing.
That's totally fine. And take pick, right? The color picker thing I wrote. I basically said this is software for Ubuntu at elementary. Right, I didn't say it's software for Linux because I wasn't going to test it on all these different varieties of things and different versions of GTK. I'm like, I ship it for Ubuntu and that's it. I haven't made it a snap currently, but the reason I haven't made it a snap is partially because there was an issue with Snapcraft, but more importantly because it's critically reliant on X, which means that it goes away soon anyway. In a Wayland world, it can't exist.
That's a good question. We should have talked about Wayland a bit more.
The Wayland argument is one that makes me want to just lie down until it goes away. I don't care as long as it works, whatever.
But this to me is the thing is that like I don't think anyone should design any technology for just the edge cases or primarily for the edge cases. Like I think the number of companies who are kind of releasing a Linux version just to be nice, I think is a handful of companies. I think most companies who have a Linux client for their software.
We speak to software devs who give us privileged access to their telemetry, and it's very clear that Linux is quite a niche. Linux desktop is very much a niche.
Oh, no doubt. But I guess,
and so they can't justify it, because if they only get subscriptions, and I'm not even talking about a paid app, like something that has a paid service, for example, they can't justify it if the revenue that comes in doesn't even pay for the developer's time to sit and make the Debian control file or go through the dance of uploading it to the repository. If it doesn't cover the cost of that guy uploading a version, why would they do it? That guy can be more productive doing other things.
But the tricky thing here is, I agree with you, but I would say that even for that, like, let's take an example such as Spotify or Microsoft with Skype, although that's a bad example because they've just pushed that support back a little bit. But I think they produce Linux versions because there is a demand and they want that coverage, right?
Skype is an interesting one, actually. It's interesting you did pick that, because as I understand it, it originated on Linux. The version that's out now was actually primarily done on Linux and then ported to the other platform.
Oh, interesting.
So that's a weird one.
The Electron version.
But what I was going to say is, if we're basically saying the only way to serve those people, those companies, is to make it easy for them to produce a means for them to deliver their software to all distributions, what we're then talking about is the one true packaging format that all distros use, which historically has never even come close to succeeding, right? Not even close. It's a great idea, and in the same way that for years people were saying we should have one desktop, right? With people saying we should have one display server. But historically, that's never been the case in the Linux world. So my view is, you know what? I think Snappy's a cool technology. I think it one of the benefits of Snappy over Flatpak is that it does have that breadth across desktop, server, and everything else, which Flatpak has been very specifically stated as focusing on the desktop. So why not play to the strengths and just focus on Ubuntu? That's just my. I think it's honourable that Canonical want to broaden that much further.
I think your view is disproved by history, because in general, and I'm generalising quite a bit here, but bear with me, the largest group of developers of applications who weren't intimately involved in the distribution open source world and so didn't want their thing in the archives of every distro, but they were building something which wanted to run on Linux, were game manufacturers. And they didn't go, okay, we'll just pick Debs because they're the most popular, or RPMs because they're the most popular. What they did was they built a completely independent system, something like Loki Setup or whatever, or where you download a SHA file and then run it and it would unpack into being everything. They didn't use any of them, because they went, we want something which works everywhere, because if we're going to put effort into Linux, it might as well work everywhere on Linux, rather than going, we'll give you a deb which someone on Fedora just flat out can't use. we'll say we'll give you something which is a bit hard for everybody, rather than great for some people and not great for others.
And the net result of that is nowadays what tends to happen is there's a deb that targets Ubuntu, and then there's a tarball for everyone else.
Yeah.
Right. But I would say with your example there, Ag, that, yeah, I'm not saying that people don't want it to run everywhere. Of course they want it to run everywhere. What I'm saying is that historically, efforts at producing that central way of doing things outside of building an individual ecosystem have failed. The ecosystem that's worked well has been Steam.
Yes.
Right? Steam, but that's because Steam are basically an interface for people to push their shit into. Then Steam is an individual, it's an abstraction layer that then runs on the platform. Snappy is a little bit different, I think, because those applications they're fundamentally running natively on the platform. Snappy is the way in which those pieces are delivered to the platform. So to me, they're two very different things. I think that's
what Steam is. Steam is basically a cross-platform packaging format.
I don't know. Anyway, I think the outcome of this is, I think we're all very supportive of Snappy. It's good to see that the work that's going on there, supportive of this new desktop release. What else, Popey, have you got to share in the last few minutes that was interesting about this, about Ubuntu and this new release?
Oh, blimey. So I really value one feature that came into 17.10 that has probably been in other distros, and I apologize if it has. I've been blinkered to it by not running those other distros, which is captive portal support. Number of times I've been in a coffee shop and I connect to a coffee shop network and I happen to have my browser open and every single browser tab redirects to a captive portal page. Now, Network Manager has captive portal logon. So when you connect to the network, a browser-y type window, a WebGTK thing pops up and you can sign in and then you don't lose all the tabs that you had open. Personally, I value that over pretty much every other thing that's in Ubuntu 17.10.
How reliable is it? Because iOS, in my experience, is quite good at captive portals. The Android is shocking.
It's really good. It does the old connectivity check to a specific URL, detects that thing isn't what it should be, and then hits you with a browser window. We had problems with it early on in the cycle, and we were testing it like by connecting to random Wi-Fi networks in London. Around the Canonical office, and also I was testing it on the train on the way in and out of the office and stuff like that. So we did some real world testing, and sure enough, it broke in certain circumstances. But those things seems to be ironed out, and now I've not had a problem with it at all. It's been really rock solid.
I have one final question before we wrap up the segment, which we should.
Is it tomorrow yet?
Is the Ubuntu Rally look quite cool? How did that go?
Yeah, that was really intense, actually. It was a bit like a hybrid of a Ubuntu UDS, the developer summits of old, and the kind of internal sprints that we do. There was like 200 people from Canonical there, a whole bunch of people from outside the company that we invited to come along. Some were sponsored, like people from Elementary and Solus and Skype and Slack, and some interesting developers who came along. It was really intense, really, really good. Great to be in New York.
It looked great. The video that Chris Fisher put online was brilliant.
It was a good idea.
The idea of having a sort of a press contact for these things, doesn't he? It's more sort of invite your mates along, but they're sort of press thing. That was a really nice thing to do.
It was quite funny when you're sat at your laptop tapping away, and then you look over your shoulder and there's an SLR hanging over your shoulder filming what you're doing. I was like, oh, hello, Chris. How you doing? Yeah, it was good.
Tip for the future: if you're doing other things, or they're not super duper private or anything, then having someone there to just do this sort of thing is really cool.
We're doing another one. I think March next year. I don't know location yet, but it looks like this could be a regular thing, and we'll be reaching out to community people who we'd love to have along. They're not like they're not like the old UDSs where people would sit around and chat a lot. These are real like all-day hacking sessions. You tend to sit there and code and work on stuff. So it's an opportunity to work together.
So they're working sprints as opposed to discussion sprints.
Yeah,
exactly. Right.
But that's quite, and it was cool to see Ike there doing solo stuff as well.
It was great fun. Had a lot of good times with Ike.
So, yes, people, go to ubuntu.com. Go get the new version of Ubuntu in whichever flavor you want it. Thanks, Popey.
No worries.
Well, thank you, Popey, for joining us today. It's been a blast having you on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course, always a pleasure. So you were at Freenode. I'm going to have to drop, just so everybody knows, I might silently fade off into the distance because I have to log off in 4 minutes for a phone call. But, Well, we got a couple of events to talk about. Maybe we'll talk about mine first because I got to log off, and then I want to hear about Freenode Live, which Matthew Garrett was keynoting, right? So, so I was at the Open Source Summit in Prague last week. It was very cool. Got to hang out with Jeremy in person, which was always good fun. And it was quite cool. I have to say, I like European events. They're a little different to the US events because US events are in these massive convention centers, and this one was in like a Hilton on 3 levels, and everyone was kind of crammed together a little bit, and it was fun.
It was fun rather than being, super duper enterprise. It kind of looked super duper enterprise.
Well, it is. It's a business event. I mean, it's an open source business event. It's the Linux Foundation, So, let's just not forget, Langridge, that you work in the open source business. Enterprise is not necessarily a bad thing.
Did you attend any talks, Jono, or anything? Any highlights from the event that you want to share?
Jeremy has been and Alana have been working on a panel which is called Jeremy Panel.
It's not called Jeremy Panel.
They're trying to rename it. I tried to convince them to name it Freckle after your good standing, Mr. Langridge.
That's very kind of you.
Because Langridge is involved in this. They did a great talk.
This is going to come up on a future show, to be clear.
Yeah. There was this 11-year-old kid was hacking robot cars on stage, which was quite cool.
Nice.
It was good. It was a good event. It was well received.
Some of the videos are actually online as well on YouTube. The Linux Foundation published them. Not all of them. Sadly, Jeremy's talk is not. But your keynote was.
Yeah, the keynotes are online. And I saw the camera on in some rooms, but not all rooms.
I tweeted at Events LF and asked them, and they said, the keynotes were recorded and one other track or session or setup or something was recorded, but not all of the talks.
Yeah,
so, but you can go watch Jono's keynote on
incentives.
YouTube. But did you enjoy it? Was it worth going?
It was definitely worth going. I thought it was good. I was bummed out because All Things Open was happening at the same time, which a good friend of mine, Todd Lewis, runs, and it's All Things Open is a brilliant event in Raleigh, and I was really, really a bit upset that I couldn't go to both. But I was running the Open Community Conference. Yeah, so. But, and from what I understand, All Things Open was great as well.
Yeah, so. Jess Rose was there.
We need fewer events.
I was watching people tweeting from All Things Open. It looked like it was cool. So,
I saw a little Ubuntu reunion going on there. A bunch of Canonical, ex-Canonical and Canonical people getting together at All Things Open, which looked quite fun.
It did.
Yes.
So, Freenode Live.
Yes, I'm going, but I will listen to your review of Freenode Live later, Popey. Thanks again.
No worries.
Right.
Peace out.
Go away. Talk to me about Freenode Live.
So Freenode Live is a conference organised by the IRC network. Well, the people who run the IRC network, Freenode, and it happened in Bristol last weekend. And we, Ubuntu Canonical, were one of the sponsors. There's a whole bunch of sponsors of this event, and there was a bunch of talks given, and had a little bit of exhibition space where we were there. YubiKey, SUSE. Private internet access, the KDE people were there, Mindtest were there.
So this is a vibe kind of like OggCamp or something like that, right?
Yeah, actually, Crystal came up to me and she asked how it went and everything, and she said we were trying to spark a kind of Lug Radio Live kind of vibe.
Really?
Yeah, because and a bit like OggCamp as well. It was very similar, the same kind of vibe. Many of the similar people you would have seen at those events. So yeah, people like Matt Garrett, Karen Sandler. Chris Lamb, the DPL, was there as well. So a whole bunch of people giving talks over a 2-day period. It was in Bristol at what used to be the Science Museum. I think it's called We Are Curious. It was a great little venue. We were upstairs, out the way, but below us there was the Science Museum with loads of kids running around, lunatics with various experiments and toys, sciencey toys to play with and stuff. It was a really, really nice venue, well organised. Could do with better coffee, but other than that, it was it was really good. There weren't a huge number of people there. I think they were hoping for more, I think they got somewhere around about 100 people over the 2 days.
But this is the first year of it, right?
Yeah, it's the first time they've done it.
And presumably they're looking to go back up. I mean, the first...
Yeah, they've already announced the second one is the first weekend in November next year.
Nice. The first Lag Radio Live wasn't as big as the later ones. So you expect this kind of thing to trend up a bit, you know?
Yeah, totally. And I would totally go again. I don't know if they're going to have it in the same venue. They may well do.
I like this kind. I mean, I was at Hackfronts. It was here in Birmingham last weekend, and again, similar kind of a vibe. You know, different tracks of talks and so on and so forth. And it's cool to see this kind of thing go on. And again, both very much sort of free culture, open source, free software focused. Which is nice. You've got that. You've got OggCamp, as we mentioned. So there's loads of stuff going on.
Yeah, we had an Ubuntu stand, so we had the orange tablecloth out with the logo and the pop-up thing, and we had some USB keys and pens and stickers and that, which attracted people over. But there was a constant stream of people who were existing Ubuntu users. In fact, one guy came up to me before we'd even set up and said, "Hey, have you got a USB key with the latest release on it? I want to upgrade my laptop." And I was like, "Well, no, I don't, but I've got my laptop and I've got a USB key." So I DD'd the image onto a USB key, gave it to him, and he flashed his machine while we were there.
See, this is why we need the Stuart's target disk mode. Every Ubuntu laptop is able to act as a USB stick that can be plugged into other laptops and do an upgrade or an installation, in my opinion. Although I've had limited success convincing A, Canonical, and B, Wimpress of this, but it would be so.
It was easier. It was easier for me to just give him a USB stick and then walk away.
It's just easier. But yes,
it totally was.
So as Jono says, thank you very much for coming on the show.
No worries. It was great. Thanks for asking.
We appreciate it. You have filled Jeremy's shoes. Not surprising, given the relative sizes of your shoes and Jeremy's shoes, but
slightly overfilled. Yes.
But yes, thank you for coming on, and I hope you enjoy listening to Mr. Pope, and go away and listen to his podcast as well with Martin Wimpress and Mark Johnson, which if you're a regular listener to Ubuntu Podcast, I'd be interested to know whether you listen to them or us first today.
Right. Now, the thing is, I've got to edit our show. So I wonder if I can get it out before you guys do.
Well, you almost certainly can. Jono edits ours, then I have to publish it. Whereas you'll edit and publish at the same time, deliberately early, just to annoy me.
Maybe I won't share my audio files with you.
I see how it works. Right, thank you very much. This is Some of Bad Voltage, out.